Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And this topic of this 10-minute moan is quite bizarre. It's something I thought I would never say, but it involves allegations of corruption of information from our own Met Office. Now I say these things are things that I never contemplated having to discuss. It's down to the fact that only recently I've actually came to the conclusion that our government and departments and civil service and quangos are just as likely to be corrupt as anywhere else in the world. Because my deep held belief that the United Kingdom was just better than other people was blown away recently, and that was down to the scandal that is USAID or USAID. And when we see people in all levels of the establishment making money from aid, it made me consider that the only difference between our politicians and establishment doing the same as America is a belief that for some reason ours are actually immune from corruption. And I'm no longer able to accept that notion. So this story, an allegation that I came across, was on X Twitter, and it was from a account called The Stark Naked Brief. Now, I do not know who The Stark Naked Brief is, but this person's bio describes him as a former political strategist, part-time citizen journalist, based in the United Kingdom with investigations, reports and research. Now, I do not know for a minute who this person is, so I can't say whether they're dynamite or nonsense. However, you can only take them in face value and consider the information in front of you. And that's exactly what I've done. And the conclusion is, this is stinking. Now, the thread they put out yesterday, which was the 4th of March, I'll put a link to it so you can go and read it yourself. I'll cover most of the stuff in this video. But on the first page of the post of this thread, they declare Britain's state-backed weather and climate service has been up to some astonishing things. At the centre of it all, one woman most have probably never heard of, Penelope Endersby, Chief Executive Officer of the Met Office. Her agency actions might leave you speechless. So it says Endersby has led the Met Office since December 2018. The agency operates as a trading fund under the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, supplying climate data that shapes government policy. It manages hundreds of temperature stations across Britain, frequently cited in policy announcements, and serves as the UK's primary weather forecaster. As a trading fund, it runs with financial autonomy, handling its own revenues and expenses outside the government's main budget, allowing it to function more like a business. Given its role in providing data-driven insights, you'd expect the Met Office to be rigorously objective. In reality, it's far from it. Last December, journalist Ray Sanders uncovered through a series of FOIs that, wait for this, 103 out of the 302 climate stations recording UK temperatures don't exist. Stop right there a minute and consider this. That's over 1/3 of the stations that they claim record weather data are not weather stations recording weather data. And we use this data to keep going the net zero crusade that we see many take part in. And this appears to be yet another industry and subsection of an industry created all around net zero, where lots of people are becoming very rich on this drive for something that many now believe won't make any difference whatsoever if we achieve it or not. The only thing it will achieve is a poorer country. But there'll be lots of rich people. It goes on, by examining historical logs, he found that the Braemar No. 2 station, for example in Aberdeenshire, had supposedly been collecting data since 1959, despite the weather station only being installed in 2005. Now you might think, well, what's wrong with that? I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with that. We keep hearing that the temperature, if it rises like 1.5 degrees, it will be the end of the world as we know it. We, for a long time, spoke in terms of global warming, but you, like me, have probably realised this change in words to now climate change, when they realised that the planet, in fact, was not getting warmer. So if we tell you the data from 1959 shows a 0.25% increase or a 0.25 degree increase in the temperature, then it helps drive a narrative that possibly doesn't exist. What Sanders uncovered was the Met Office merging data from nearby sites to estimate temperatures. But then he found out they were doing worse with their current recordings. So I suppose, if you say, take one in Paisley and you take one in Livingston and you suggest Glasgow might be somewhere in the middle, that might be what they were suggesting, that you might think, well, that seems logical. But when the current recordings, the one in Paisley and the one in Livingston, are doubtful, then how can the estimation for the bit in the middle be taken serious at all? So Dover and Folkestone have both seen recording temperatures, but neither actually exists. Instead, Endersley and their crew have been using stations sometimes well over 10 miles away to report precise temperatures for those locations. It's bonkers, isn't it? When Sanders confronted them, the Met Office spokesman admitted, we are regressing analysis to create a model of the relationship between each station and others in the network. Weeks later, after the revelation, on social media, the Met Office quietly renamed the website that contained those recordings from UK climate averages to location-specific long-term averages. So instead of making a sort of point in fact, they're now sort of mushing up the description. They even added a disclaimer. The page now states that its location cover the UK evenly, but not necessarily corresponding to the actual weather stations. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet change that made it look as if it'd always been there. In short, they have used questionable data to evidence heating claims, which the legacy media then repeat, and rather than addressing the issue, they quietly rebranded the methods without proper explanation. Even where real temperature stations exist, their placement raises doubts about their accuracy. Now stay tuned, this bit's bonkers. This bit just melted my head. Some of Britain's most alarming heat records come from locations surrounded by artificial heat sources. So when you hear, we're at a record temperature in Walthamstow, if it was surrounded by other things creating heat, then it would be no wonder. So this one is bonkers. There's two, I think, examples given here that blew my mind. In 2023, an extreme temperature was recorded at Teddington Bushy Park, where the measuring device sat beside a high wall reflecting heat and a newly built housing development. It's a heat trap. These things exist. We're taking the temperature from them. And then we're using that data to suggest someplace 10 miles away might be similar. And putting the fear of God into people and telling them that we need to achieve net zero. Similarly, this one's bonkers. Chertsey's highest summer temperatures were read last June faced scrutiny when it was revealed that the device was located at a newly installed solar farm with over 1,800 panels. An obvious heat source. Now, when the fear of God is driven into us by saying all we need is like a 1.5% increase in the heat, and we show like half or even 3/4 degree of increase, people will duly think that's pretty scary. When that increase could be because the machine is next to a brick wall, possibly a light coloured one, which will reflect heat, or in a place like this with 1,800 solar panels. You would think that would raise the temperature by 0.5 degree or so. without causing us to have the fear of God. Sanders confronted them again about the solar panels. The response: the temperature measurements meet standards for publication and scientific use. So we just ignore common sense and logic. Because like a lot of things, when you set out to prove something, you'll be able to prove it. There's data to prove anything. There's data, by the way, to convince you 100% that the world's round as a globe, and there's also data to suggest that 100% that the world's flat. So that you can prove anything doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So it wouldn't be that difficult to convince the population that the average temperature in the countries went up by close to 1 degree, and if we go to 1.5, we all die, by selecting where you take the readings and where you set the standards for publication and scientific use, because you're the governing body. This is meant, see, when you sit down and break this down, this sounds like a silly wee thing. It's actually massive. It is ridiculous. So, in September 2024, an FOI request revealed brutal contrast in assessments. While international standards classify nearly 80% of Met Office weather stations are unreliable, the Met Office itself rates over 90% of them as excellent, good or satisfactory. Strange that, isn't it? When someone else is marking your score, you do terrible. When you mark it yourself, you're doing fantastic. One of the most notorious examples of their quality weather temperature stations came out in July 2022 when they announced that the UK had hit 40 degrees for the first time ever. Oh, Crivens, help my Bob, we're all going to die. Britain hit 40 degrees. One reading was taken at RAF Coningsby, a military airbase, just as 3 fighter jets were landing nearby. The Met Office labelled the record as a milestone in climate history. No wonder. Now, you can see in the photograph here, the thing's not right next to the runway. It's only about 10 feet away, maybe 10 yards, maybe been a wee bit harsh there. But if anybody's ever went onto an aeroplane, even one that's landed a while ago, you can still feel a rise in temperature when you close to the engines to gain access to the airplane, when you go airside to get onto a plane. The same when you come off one. I would imagine they've been 10 yards away from 3 landed, or recently landed, jet fighter planes. There would be a bit of a noticeable difference in the temperature. But that's recorded as Armageddon. The end of the world is nigh. Because we read the temperature 10 yards away from where jet planes land and taxi into the buildings. These people are actually virgin criminal, if not already so. And it creates this whole thing, this whole new industry of net zero. Another industry, like the industry of immigration, creating millionaires and no doubt billionaires on a yearly basis. The BBC ran with the headline, the UK's 40-degree heatwave basically impossible without climate change. Well, no, it's basically impossible without jet aircraft landing in an airfield. But the BBC, meant to be the bastions of news and truth in the United Kingdom, put that as their headline. It's actually deplorable. Beyond station placement, the Met Office has been caught tampering with historical climate data. Older readings from mid-20th century have been lowered, while recent temperatures have been artificially increased. We can then use that as well. There you go, it's went up 0.75 degrees. The first adjustments from 1940 data by subtracting 0.15 degrees. Then, between 2000 and 2014, the revised Hartcroft's original report of 0.03 degrees centigrade per decade warming raised to 0.08 degrees. The latest version now reports 0.14 per decade of increase. These figures are simply not true. Endersley and the Met Office say, let's say, misdeeds go on. The rest of the breakdown is here, and it's got a link to their website, which I'll put in the comments below this video. and all sources linked, as always. That, my friends, is absolutely frightening. This is something that I've felt for a while. This drive for net zero is nothing more than a scam, because in my lifetime, I remember as a school kid being told about acid rain and how it was probably going to be difficult to walk outdoors without protective clothing on. Never happened. I was told about the ozone was irreparable and we were heading for a disaster. It never happened. I was then told about global warming, which I noticed, but many didn't, suddenly get reinvented into climate change because the earth wasn't getting warmer. And the climate change, that's having two sides in a coin toss. Because if anything happens to the weather, it gets windier, it gets colder, it gets warmer. That was another thing. Sea levels. Venice was meant to have disappeared by now. I remember going there as a kid of primary school age. That was about 10 years old, maybe younger. And someone telling us then that, just as well you came, because it may not be here long. I'm now 52. Venice is still there. So all this fear and, the changing from, global warming, oh no, we're going to explode, to climate change, it's concerned me for some time. And not purely because it does make sense not putting pollutions in the air. I kind of get that. But we've got things called trees that can do that naturally. We chop them down. Because there's no great money in putting trees in and letting them grow and work as an air filter for our earth. But there is plenty of money in all these green initiatives that we've seen over the last, 20 years. So if you enjoyed this video and you want other people to see it and help the channel grow, then please do two things. Click the like button, the thumbs up. It's free and take you half a second. Or if you've got more than a half a second, type some comments in. Both these things help the algorithm. And obviously, if you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. That will help. We're just about 60,000 subscribers just now. And I want that to grow. That would be great. So please help me. But most important thing of all, as long as you're not the type of person that's pushing lies, misinformation, and no you, but
everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.